Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. This is a podcast all about normalizing these conversations, relationship, sexuality, intimacy, power dynamics. You got it. We're going there. Today, I've got a special guest, Mischa. I met this man at my first Sacred Sons event and really had a meaningful connection in a lot of different experiences. And I caught wind that he also talked about sexuality, intimacy, all of these delicious things. And I was like, Mischa, we got to talk about this later on. And I've been staying in touch with them and finally got him on the show. Welcome to the show, Mischa. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ian. That was great. So my name is Mischa Byruck. I'm calling you right now from Oakland, California. This is my home. It's where I grew up. It's also where I work. And I am, it's so funny. I actually still go back and forth on what to call myself.
Me too.
This is such like a thing in the coaching world.
Totally.
So I often call myself a men's sexual integrity and accountability coach, which is kind of a
Ooh,
mouthful.
yeah.
Um,
Like it though.
Sometimes I'm an executive coach for men who don't even want to like even name sex, but like they still have to justify hiring me. There's other times where I'm really more of a spiritual mentor. I don't take on I tend to work with men. Like my particular weird niche is at the intersection of sex, power, and harm. So I tend to work with really powerful men who are in conflict in some way. Maybe they've been called out or canceled, or maybe they've just like recognize that they could have done better in the divorce they're going through or just went through, or they could have like,
Mhm.
ooh, like there's something for me to see about like my ex-girlfriend's so mad at me right now and I need to understand why. Like sometimes they're just stepping up into a big position of leadership and want to shore up their own practices, really keep their energy clean. They know that maybe they're really flirty and they want to make sure that they're really
Mm.
keeping their energy in a good way.
Yeah.
So that's my little niche. Sometimes I call myself an applied ethicist, which is fun. That's for the like the crypto effective altruist crowd here in the Bay Area. Um,
Tell us
that
more
that
about
that tends to
that.
land more, right? Because the work that I do isn't just about self actualization. I talk about morality. I talk about ethics. I talk about the good, and I talk about walking in a righteous way, not just in a way that is self-serving. A lot of the men's coaching world is really on a in a big way about making our our the kind of worst parts of our world just go around more smoothly, right? It's like you want to just keep on being a cog in the capitalist machine. Let me just make sure, let me give you some tools to like work with your boss better.
Oh,
You want to just keep on like hooking up with as many women as you possibly can acquire. Let me help you do that as a pickup coach or as a dating or intimacy coach.
let me do,
Let me just
let me help you
help
do some.
these wheels spin faster. And
Let
that's
me help
not
you.
what I'm interested in doing. I'm just not interested in helping those particular wheels spin faster or more smoothly. That's a lot of what coaching is.
So, in the way that I shared earlier, I did light up when I learned that you were talking about sexuality, working with sexuality, because it's one
Mm,
of those things that is particularly in men's work. When I run into a
mm,
man that's diving deeper into that aspect of men's work, I light up.
mm,
And I've
mm,
actually never asked you this, but what on your path, both
mm.
men's work, men's personal development, and sexuality, like what was your journey with those two?
Well, it's such a big journey because I'm a man in the world. I'm 43. I've never been married. I have no children. I've had a series of long and healthy and happy relationships. I'm friends with all but one of my exes. We had a bad breakup with about 15 years ago, and uh, the capacity in that bad breakup that I discovered for my own capacity to harm was in part what over years drew me deeper into this work to understand both the kinds of harm that we're capable of, even if we have really, really good intentions, and even if like, and not just the ways that we can be misunderstood. I think a lot of young men are very worried about being misunderstood, of being clumsy, and having that be understood as creepy or icky or even predatory. But how we can actually do legit, valid harm that not just be misunderstood, but genuinely do harm, even with not just the best of intentions, but with real deep feminist bona fides that we are that if we really think that we're an ally, we can still do harm. And reconciling myself with my capacity to harm, I think, is a huge part of what I think of when I think of responsible manhood. I think of,
Mm,
to be a good man on this in this world is to have a healthy and humble relationship with your own power, one that understands your capacity to do harm, especially to women, if you're a straight man, but really just in general,
yeah.
and one that is willing to both walk in a good way and then to own it when you've missed the mark, own it when you fucked up, and be willing to improve. I'm not like I've so my journey with sexuality is really, really complicated and nuanced. I'm queer. I've been in a huge sexual exploration for many years. I'm 18 months completely celibate. Uh,
Oh,
I am, but before that, I was poly. I'd go to play parties. I'd organize play parties. During COVID, I organized an all virtual, like what I called virtual erotic adventures, which is basically like Zoom sex parties for like lonely people at home. But like with a lot of facilitation. So I've like brought in neo tantra facilitators to raise everybody's energy with like guided self pleasuring sessions. I mean, really edgy stuff. But anyway, I find a lot of wisdom and beauty in conscious erotic exploration. And I'll just say that it wasn't until I found this world that's really prominent in the Bay Area, but also in Berlin and Tokyo and New York, a little bit less in LA, but definitely huge here in the Bay Area, of people and communities that were interested in exploring their sexualities in a really intentional way, right? And when I say intentional, I mean creating facilitated, sober containers in which to do it. That's really kind of the one of the biggest essence. I hated pickup bars. I hated the entire pickup scene. I hated that like every like sex had to involve alcohol. Maybe your listeners
mm,
might resonate that this is like their experience, that like we just kind of mush ourselves together and hope that like at some point the booze or the drugs or the awkwardness allows something to emerge. Like I hated all of that. I hated the way that um the I hated being single in a context that didn't allow for I wanted a lot of casual sex. I wanted for a lot of my to be explorative, to have sex that was not divorced from love and
yeah.
honor and respect, but that was divorced from the relationship escalator. From
Yeah.
okay, now that we have sex, we must be boyfriend and girlfriend. And now we're boyfriend and girlfriend. We must be evaluating each other for whether or not we can be partners. And now that we're doing that, like we should be moving in together, and then we should have children. There should be a marriage, and like it wasn't that I'm opposed to any of those
Yeah.
things, but I knew that for my own soul's journey, I needed to
Yeah.
have different experience, and I didn't like that the only option that felt available to me was in some way to misrepresent or be dishonest
Yeah.
about my intentions, because there wasn't a space that I could see for, hey, I'm really only interested in connecting with you in the casual way, that also wasn't simultaneously inherently disrespectful. Does that resonate with you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, oh, I wrote so many things down of all the things that I resonated with, but I want to stay right here because this is so good. I've been on a very similar path where it's like I'm not against monogamous long-term relationships. That's actually the majority of what I find myself is a long-term monogamous relationship. But as you were talking about it, I am such an adventurous spirit. That is, I came into this world adventurous. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make forts in the sticker bushes and climb to the highest part of the tree. That has nothing to do with sexuality. That just has to do with adventure. And then
Mm.
I don't change because I go into a bedroom that now I'm no longer adventurous. I carry that same adventurous spirit. And
Yeah.
it has been such a potent path, and I think extremely beneficial to learn how to be a man of integrity that can communicate that in a way that isn't deceitful or dishonest. Because,
So, and it's so, yeah, sorry, go on. I
well,
interrupted
I
you.
just wanted one last piece was the things that I picked up as a kid was I was too much, and so I had to live in the shadowy gray areas of lying and not saying the full truth
Yeah.
because that wouldn't be
Yeah. Yeah.
accepted.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
adventurous experience wasn't accepted of me. And so I
hmm
learned how to lie perfectly, which was I wasn't lying, but I wasn't saying the thing. So I had to completely reprogram that.
Really, really, yeah, really appreciate that. And I imagine that your listeners may resonate, right? That I mean, if I like one of the dreams that I have for the world is a world in which uh men and women and people of all genders are able to uh explore their sexualities. And when I say explore their sexualities, I mean discover what is the potency. And I mean, I'm a deeply religious and spiritual man. Like, I do believe that part of what our sexualities represent is an access point to the divine.
Mm,
Without getting too esoteric in this conversation, I think that part of sexual exploration can sound like mindless hedonism or
totally,
self-indulgence,
totally.
especially, and so I actually have a lot of um, yeah, I have a lot of compassion and empathy for that perspective, and I think, frankly, it would be disingenuous for me to pretend that mindless hedonism and unhealthy hedonism and self indulgence isn't present in the sex positive communities that I have also been a part of, and that wasn't present in some ways for me in my journey. Like, I just need to name that. Um,
Yeah.
and a sober or facilitated space does not prevent it from being potentially hedonistic and self-indulgent and acquisitive and consumptive and transactional in a bad way. There
Yeah.
is a delicate dance and a balance here. But my dream for the world is that we have a chance to explore our sexualities without shame,
Yeah.
that we accept that a lot of the way that exploring sexualities may look is different than it different for many people, not for everybody, but maybe different or distinct from that which can possibly be done in a exclusive monogamous container for some people. That, like, moving from complete celibacy, having never hooked up with anybody, into monogamous marriage may not actually be conducive to our highest good for some people. For some
Right.
people,
Right.
with no right, but that um, there are beautiful, honoring ways of facilitating sexual exploration that don't involve lying, don't involve deceit, don't involve obfuscating truths or hiding truths, and also not don't necessarily involve what is essentially a free for all meat market, in which we are in many ways, like, accessing incredibly uh, transactional and capitalist paradigms of attractiveness, of high value or low value, of transactionality, literally, and just like paying for a date and therefore creating a sense of obligation. Um, we're accessing some of the most toxic parts of our gendered programming of, like, as a man, women owe me sex, especially if I pay for something. As a woman, I guess I owe him sex if he's paid for something. I guess I owe him sex if he's I guess I owe him sex if he's married me. I guess I owe him sex because it's been a long time. Yeah, she does owe me sex because it's been a long time. She does. Yeah, that's all the soup that we swim in. And I think healthy sexual exploration slows all of that down, but still creates a space for joy, for pleasure, for us to be. It's one of the most beautiful ways that humans have to relate to each other. And so I try to hold these sometimes conflicting truths together at the same time.
Yeah. It's oh man, with everything that you shared, I can just feel into the narrow, it's almost like a tightrope that we have to walk to find a healthy path with sexuality because there's,
Yes.
you know, the drinking part with intimacy is so huge
Oh,
for early on. It's I remember in my early 20s, I was one of my best friends, he had never been with his partner sober, and they had been
mhm.
together for a long time.
Oh, sure.
And so we're walking this path that is kids are drinking when they're young and they're not feeling comfortable in their own skin. So this allows them to go into that. And maybe they have rules in their mind that allows them to walk through to explore in that way. And then there's the fear of hedonism and being an addict and being
Hmm.
bad
Hmm.
and wrong and
Hmm.
all that. And then there's like the closed off version that's just like, you have to do it exactly this way. You have to do this, and then you get married, and then you're allowed to have sex, and there's nowhere to talk about it, and then nobody's going to teach you anything,
Hmm.
and then you're not going to have sex because you're not going to get along. You don't have any
Yeah, and then let's just talk about like that assumption that marriage is therefore your right. But one of the counterparts of that is that assumption is not just the thing that I need to get to in order to like have sex, but that once I'm in it, I will be owed it, right? Since we're talking about men, that like what and but also right like people
yeah,
that
yeah.
like I will be that is now my right. And up until the 70s or 80s in this country, up until the 90s in other countries in Europe, marital rape wasn't considered a crime. It was considered impossible for a husband to rape his wife. That happens all the time. That like sexual entitlement,
Whoa.
coercion, and power abuse happens within the context of marriage. And I don't mean in some big violent like
Yeah.
dramatic way. I mean that our stories inform us in really, really potently, often really destructive ways about what we are owed. And I mean, yeah, I think a big part of a responsible sexual journey is coming to real terms, not just intellectually, but deep inside ourselves with the programming that we've received. Sometimes I have my clients fill out this worksheet of a checkbox. It's like a 3-page long list of stories that we might have inherited. Things like the only kind of rape that really counts is if it's violent, or the like anybody who has ever done sexual harm must be a bad man, or it's not really sex if it's not penis and vagina penetration, or I've gone down on her so she owes me a blowjob, or we've kissed, now I owe her a date, right? These
Mm.
patriarchal narratives. I don't want your listeners to freak out if I talk about capitalism and patriarchy, just like, hey, everybody, look, this is a soup that we're swimming in. I'm not judging it. I'm not like a
Yeah,
woke,
yeah,
blah, 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 blah. Just like, but these are useful words for understanding like the context of the soup that we all swim in. And when I
yeah,
say we, I mean me too.
yeah.
Like
System
part,
in which we've been raised, surrounded by, and a lot of people, like you said, programmed with and within.
yeah, yeah. And I'll add like a little caveat, which is that like, I definitely like, not caveat, but like, okay, I try my best to hold myself in many ways in opposition to the more misogynist uh, tendencies within the pickup artist arena and within the men's coaching arena, ones that I feel like are deeply values misaligned with me. But even those, even like men like Andrew Tate, they don't deny that patriarchy exists. They're simply orienting you to take advantage of it. Negging and a lot of pickup artist techniques are ways of acknowledging that patriarchy exists and simply saying, and therefore, here are the skills that will most likely access the deepest insecurities in women because of that patriarchy that will allow you in to maximize your head count.
Get
So
what you want.
simultaneously, both the left and the right political spectrums acknowledge the existence of of these systems, of this soup that we swim in. I think it's actually a dangerous conceit to go and here's the other thing. I think it's actually a huge detriment to us that the liberal narrative has also told us, which is that hey, men and women are all equal.
Yeah,
So long as
yeah,
you just treat men and women as equal, so long as we're just take everybody the same,
yeah,
then you're good. But
yeah.
that's not quite true, is it?
Right.
Either is it? If you treat women the same way exactly that you treat men, you're going to often cause harm
Yeah, yeah,
as a man. It doesn't mean that you necessarily treat them with kid gloves or treat them paternalistically or pejoratively, but if you're not adjusting your energy,
Right.
If you're not acknowledging the fact that when a man and a woman go to bed, there's different political and frankly physical acts that are happening. He is not assuming the same kind of physical bodily risk of pregnancy that she is, for instance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Those are different acts.
Will you say that again? Just because I think that's so important just to like sit
When
with
a
it
man and a
time.
woman go to bed together, those two acts of let's have sex are different politically, but also physically.
Wow.
He may in right his penis may be involved, he may ejaculate, he may not, but for her she's navigating all kinds of like potential infections in her body. She's talking right, like there's a huge amount more that can happen inside of her body because of the presence of a member, even one with a condom on. She's
Yeah.
navigating the potential, she's navigating her moon, she's navigating her potential for pregnancy. She's navigating the degree to which she can trust the man to continue to wear a condom if he's promised to, or if he's agreed to, or to the degree to which she has to maintain some level of awareness of like
Yeah.
guard, making sure, like, do I
Yeah.
have to police him and make
Yeah.
sure that he continues to use it? Do I have to, even if I don't have to police him, do I have to be the one who insists on it? And like, or does he get to volunteer? Like, and then if she does get pregnant, even with a condom use, she assumes all the risks. She
Yeah.
has no guarantee. Even if he's like, well, I'm a really nice guy, she should know that I'm a really nice guy. I would totally pay for the abortion. What if that's against her religion? What if right? But she still wants to have sex. What if it's important to her, but it actually could cause her physical danger to have an abortion? What if a pregnancy could cause her physical danger?
Yeah.
Like physical danger. I'm not talking about like some esoteric, like, oh my God, people are like hurt feelings. I'm talking about literal harm to her body.
Yeah.
And all of that is a like, so does that make sense? Like these are different
Yeah.
acts.
I think
They have different connotations. So
this
this,
is
yeah,
the
the
whole,
liberal myth of equality is also like equality, of course, before the law, equality, of course, before like in terms of respect, in terms of ability to lead or lead corporations or lead governments, of course. But like, and I don't mean inequality. I just mean that if we think of everybody as equal, as the same, what men's tendency to do is just to treat women like men, and that's really not useful.
no. I'm so grateful that you brought that. And once, I feel a natural tendency to think about the listeners that you would call good guys or nice guys. I tend to think about the guys that go, "Oh, I don't want to be that. I
No,
don't want
I
to
think,
be."
and I think that's like the vast majority. I don't know about you. Like, I really don't meet that many men who are like, oh, I don't care about being a good man. Like, I really don't. Like, I work
Totally.
with like men who have caused sometimes who have caused real harm.
Totally.
Men who other men and women might write off as like bad men, and I just, I have not experienced that. In my experience, virtually all of us want to be good men, and
What
what
I
that
like,
looks like, it requires is, you know, is where the work lies.
what I
Sorry,
like
go
to,
on.
yeah, what I like to speak to, and when we talk about these things, because this was a deep lesson for me in accountability. With
Oh,
accountability, at first it was like, oh, I'm in trouble. I've done something wrong. I'm bad. I need
I'm
to
bad.
do this to be good to other people. And what changed for me was when I realized, no, my accountability is my power. Like it says, on your page, responsibility and power. It's like, oh, my accountability is my power. And so I really want to bring that here to this conversation too, where it's like the more
Mm.
we understand the power dynamics, even if we look at there's more danger if we're with a female, that's actually
It
empowering for us. That there's
can
an
be.
that there's an act yeah, how can we show that there's that power that comes from being informed where someone might be listening right now and they're like, I've never thought of that before. And they might contract a little bit and like, I don't want to be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine almost all, especially in the wake of Me Too and um, like a lot of social media messaging. I am 43, so I don't know what the young men are truly thinking and feeling. But from what I can see and hear, I think that, yeah, I think that a lot of men are worried about causing harm, or worried about like, what am I not understanding? And also really wanted to be heard and seen and felt and loved and understood. And Oh man, like touched and like yes, like brothers listening, like touch is important. There are ways to have like your touch needs met beyond going and getting drunk and hooking up. Like have
Mm,
people in your life who you could cuddle with and touch. It's actually a lot of what frankly all of us really are wanting. And you will find, oh God, I feel like I just want to like kind of gently spray your listeners with like a super soaker of love and self-acceptance and like, it gets better energy.
yeah,
And I can speak to
yeah,
this. I can speak to
yeah.
this because of that difference in because of that I was just describing, because of how different these two acts are. I think it's actually really healthy to frame, um, especially heterosexual sex, in through the lens of power, not because that's the only lens to look at it through. I know this is gonna like turn some men off and like oh like this feels like too political, like, but like I don't mean power in the sense of like you're bad because you're a man or she's necessarily good because she's a woman. Take it out of the realm of morality.
Yeah,
Talk about power as the ability to influence others.
yeah.
And you'll see that what's happening in a heterosexual quote hookup or even in a marriage is a complex web of ever shifting power dynamics. They are multiple, they are shifting,
Mm,
multiple and shifting. One of the most prominent is top and bottom, penetrator and penetrated. You know, if you are a man going to bed with a woman and the sex acts on the table are her strapping on a dildo and pegging you, the power dynamics are a little different, aren't they? Just notice that. Just notice that. It's still heterosexual. It's still completely heterosexual sex, everybody. That's a man and a woman in bed together. But all of a sudden, she's the penetrative partner and he's the penetrated. And just notice, ooh, oh, yeah, God, she have a lot of power over me. That's really vulnerable. Yeah, that's the power. Hello, hello, welcome. Right? Not two equal people, just like completely rational economic actors. Ooh, right? If she fucks you really hard and she like rips the lining in your anus, like that would really suck for you, and you might be really hurt, and not just physically, but kind of emotionally. Wouldn't that suck? So you'd want her to be tender with you. You'd want her to like really attune. Yeah. So like that's a way of understanding the power that you have here. Um, there's another as a man. There's also a way of understanding of like one of the power dynamics that can simultaneously be intersecting with this um is the kind of desirability, right? Like if they're going to bed, but like he's got no money and she's like super wealthy, there's a power dynamic there.
yeah,
Maybe he's hopelessly in love with her and she's kind of indifferent and she could easily leave and not be dysregulated. Maybe she comes from a really healthy family background that's really sex positive, but he just escaped a really repressive religious background and upbringing, and maybe he has a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of attachment trauma and wounding, and he's coming in with a lot of that, and she's not coming in with any of it. There's a power dynamic there, and that he's maybe a little bit more vulnerable in at that level.
hmm,
Um, Racial dynamics could play in, you know, yeah, he's a man and she's a woman, but she drops some like deeply racist comment, about him or people, of his race or, in a way that completely like kind of like puts him into defense or into resentment. And she's really not honoring the responsibility and the power of being the white person in the dynamic of being like the person who's elevated in status in our society and et cetera. So lots of intersecting power dynamics. Yeah. No right and wrong. No good and bad. And no good and bad because of identity either, or
yeah.
because of it. Just power dynamics that are existing, that are floating. There's power dynamics here between you and me right now.
Hmm.
You know, it's okay. It's everywhere. Like just yeah. And so the skill is not to think that like, oh, because power dynamics exist, as a man, I gotta be like, I'm necessarily bad. No, I don't like that thought. Like just humbling yourself before their existence and then being like, okay, given that, Where are the power dynamics happening right now? And how can I honor them? How can I be honoring of them? Right. And one of those is to intuitively offer condom usage, right? That's like a very basic, right? Like there's a, instead of insisting that she does, like raise the topic yourself. Here's another way of honoring power dynamics. Hey, I know I just paid for dinner date with you, but I want you to know that like I have no expectation.
Mm, wow.
Right? Honoring.
That's so
It's not
simple.
so simple. Another one is just checking in. Hey, not being the one to initiate everything, but also, like this is also just God, like people think that like I'm like some advocate for some like uh transactional consent culture where it's like, is it okay if I touch you here? Is it okay if I touch you here? Is this okay? Is this okay? Not only is that not sexy, that's the main complaint, is that's not sexy. But not only is that not sexy, but it completely misses the point of consent. The point of consent is not actually, ironically, about just like asking permission and extracting a yes.
Yeah.
The point of consent is two people really being in their yes, which is different.
Mm. Ooh, I love that.
I literally got a great example of this. We're going to take it out of the sexual realm. I'm going to give you a very concrete example, right? It's out of, not in the sexual realm, right? Um, it's someone's birthday and they're having a little birthday party and they're in they're, all the attention's on them and they say, hey, everybody, like, I really, really want to share a personal story with all of you right now. Is that okay? Who's going to tell them no? Who's going to be like, no, actually, we don't like, nope, not, nope. I'm really not available for that right now. No, like, no would be ridiculous. No would be impossible. No, right? So of course everyone's gonna be like, of course, birthday girl, like share your story. Like that's not really consent,
Right.
right? What she did
Right.
isn't consent in the real way, right? Like, yes, technically someone could have walked out, and like let me like hold this actually in a slightly different way. Yes, technically, like permission was given. So
Yeah.
in a legal definition, consent was technically present.
Yeah.
But the spirit of consent and what people, consent educators, many of whom are like my friends and maybe even mentors, are are trying to convey is that this that the ideal that we're striving for is not simply the base permission. We're striving for pleasure.
Yeah.
We're striving for joy. We're striving for attunement. We're striving for power awareness. We're striving for everybody to leave an interaction feeling whole, feeling juicy, feeling good. And consent culture can ironically give everybody the impression that so long as I got a yes, we're good to go. Shit.
Yeah.
But that's not how humans are. Just think in that birthday scenario of all the pressures that you would have felt if you had been there. Of course, be like the last thing I want to hear is this person just go on and on and on about their personal story. Like maybe that's, like I was in the middle of a conversation. It doesn't matter. Of course you'd go along with it. You'd go along.
Yeah.
And that's
Totally.
actually ironically a lot of
Totally.
sex.
Totally. Yeah. The classic
Going on.
fawning. I'm gonna avoid this confrontation where people are gonna be like, "What do you mean
Yeah.
you can't hear this story?" Da, 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 da. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, exactly.
avoid.
Thank you. Yes, yes, perfect. Like, what if I know this birthday girl, maybe she's had a few drinks. Like, if I say, hey, I don't think actually that's really what I want right now, all the attention will be on me, right? I will be the roadblock to the birthday girl's happiness,
Yeah.
right? She might blow up at me, or maybe just like be like, fine, and like pout. I might be ruining the evening. Everybody else might resent me afterwards. I might have to have a whole big clearing with her afterwards. She might be like, oh, like it's so much easier to just go along.
Yeah.
And this happens in sex.
Yeah.
He's fucking me so hard right now that my pussy's going to be sore tomorrow. But I don't, God, like, I don't want to get into a discussion with him about
Yeah.
how like pornography has affected his brain. Like, I don't want to get into a discussion with him about like how I needed literally 10 times more clitoral stimulation before he penetrated me. I don't want to get into a discussion where I'm educating him. I'm just trying to have a good time. Like, I don't want to be a fucking sex educator. Like, yeah, what if he gets upset? What if he makes it about his feelings? What if he just like stops and like tries to cry because he's so ashamed? Like, what if he gets angry? I'm literally in bed naked with his dick in me. What if he gets angry at me?
Yeah.
I'm at his house. Fuck it. I'm just gonna go along with it. Like, I don't think he's gonna literally like beat me or kill me, but like, I don't want to deal with his anger. I don't want to let that energy in. I have no guarantee of no essence or no real trust, that any kind of a no won't be met with anger or resistance or entitlement or self-righteousness or indignation, which it often is.
I love that you said consent is about two people in their yes, because that that is I can feel the difference of two people in their yes. And another word that came up for me when you were talking about consent was presence. It's like this
Let me
con
let me make a real clarity.
yeah.
Consent culture is about two people being in there. Yes, the thing that all these educators and like the woke mob that's really so bad is actually just trying to give you guys better sex lives. Honestly, like really, truly, like what we're trying to do is just like everybody have better sex lives. Nobody wins when people are harmed. Like the orientation should be like, what would it look like for me to be in my yes and also have her in her yes and really sense that given everything I have now learned about power and trauma and attunement, rather than just be like, is it cool if I fuck you now? Like, or even more like, hey, like, could you like maybe like help me come? Like, like it's okay, but are you attuned? Are you sensing into this other person and are you kind of maybe aware of what the power dynamics in this situation might be? Consent legally and technically is still about permission. Depends on actually some college campuses have different definitions, some states have different definitions, some countries have different definitions of what constitutes consent. It's really gnarly, actually,
Hmm.
the degree to which some of it's thought policing and also some of it's like technically this is consensual, even though because she didn't literally scream no and push him off, which is fucked up and crazy, but like, and therefore is not a crime, also fucked up and crazy. But at the same, so like we're in very very complicated waters if we get into the legal standards or definitions. But since we talk about consent, it almost always goes there. That's what's so ironic about consent culture. Men don't want to cause harm, but really what we're still oriented to in this society, in our society, just think about this: the degree to which you're still oriented around my standard is don't rape. That the only ethical standard that we have received as men is don't violently rape.
Yeah.
That's a pitiably low standard.
Yeah.
And that may potentially prevent you from literally causing or like perpetrating a crime potentially. But if that's your standard, it will not prevent you from causing harm from a woman exiting an interaction with you, feeling coerced, feeling like you had no consciousness of the power dynamic, feeling like she had to have her walls up, feeling like she has less trust in you, less trust in men, like maybe even telling her friends about that, right? Maybe having this experience in which, right, like he never let me get a word in edgewise. I didn't feel like it was safe to tell him no. That's harm, y'all. Your standards have to be about not doing harm if you're going to have ethical standards around sex. And if you orient around that, you'll see that thinking about power and attunement and trauma, as well as consent, is actually our job. Not just making sure, look, totally, I understand, like, just don't do anything without permission. Like, that's not the thing. Might be the thing to prevent crime, but not harm.
I see that as men, one of the really big roadblocks to this subject
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is the taboo-ness of
Totally.
sexuality.
Totally. Oh,
Because
I have so much compassion. I'm just, yeah.
men, we're not like, I'm committed to this path because of how little I realized there was space for men to actually talk about sex. Being in the even in the men's personal development world, I was like, wow, no, we hardly talk about sex.
I know.
And so I'm becoming more and more aware of how little sex is talked about And this is one of my biggest passions in my mission is to normalize the conversations because these subjects are tough because men aren't good at talking about it. They're not practiced.
Oh man, we're not going to talk about sex. We're also not going to talk about our feelings. I mean, we don't have to
Totally.
go there. This is like, but like,
Totally.
sometimes women ask me like, why don't you go to more men, to talk about your feelings? Why do you like so heavily rely on the women in your life? And it's because like, oh, I don't trust men to hold my feelings well or to have like a nuanced, like sensitive conversation. And like, I trust women to do that well. Anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you named it. I have so much compassion, and I just cannot, like, as an American man myself who has made all of the same mistakes.
Yeah.
I really, yeah, just honor that and honor that not just are we bad at having conversations about sex, but that the conversations that we do have about sex are often mired in kind of like the locker room talk performative stuff where it's like it's really hard to have a conversation about sex that's not about sharing accomplishments
Yeah.
and achievements and noting the notch marks on your bed or your belt, right?
Totally.
But being like, yeah, so like I have this thing where like condoms make me soft, and sometimes I'm
Yeah.
noticing that I'm really like I need to like fuck really hard or like really thrust really hard just to keep my erection.
Yeah.
But like I know that that's not how, like, ideally, like I'd be fucking softer or like I'd be like
Yeah.
thrusting softer, but like I get so insecure. And like I was with in a bed and like she just kind of like giggled a little bit and that like really, really
Yes.
hurt my feelings. And then I got resentful, and like that level of honesty is so critical for us to be able to be with each other. And like, I don't know if I honestly could say to you, I don't think I could say to you that I would have trusted all the men in my circles in my college years or in my young 20s to hold that nuance well and not simply mock me, frankly.
Totally.
Even people I thought of as friends, right? That's so crazy. Like, how, yeah, it's so tragic. But like, yeah, get you friends that can have real, honest conversations that can hold you in the nuances of your own insecurities, that can share their insecurities with you, that can, um, yeah, that's one of the most generative forms of male friendship. But you're right that it's really hard. It's really hard to talk about because it's so stigmatized.
I'm a huge proponent of make not only making these spaces, but encouraging these spaces to grow where we can have these conversations so that we do get more
Mm.
comfortable talking about these things. And I also realize in my own life, I've just started to practice on my own.
In what way?
I'll just talk out loud as if I'm in an experience and I'll just
Mm.
practice.
Hmm.
Whether it's actually when I'm aroused and I'm just practicing talking in that way, like, oh, I'd like this, I want this, whatever, it's
Interesting.
practicing that way, or just in having these conversations because I'm realizing that there's something that happens, and I don't have the science or language to it, but there's something that happens when I speak something out loud instead of it just bouncing around in my head.
Hmm.
And if I don't have a men's group, if I don't have that support, if I don't have that tightness of a container, and I don't have it all the time, then I've realized that is something I can just speak out loud as if I'm practicing it in real life. And that actually helps me in getting the energy to move, and it gets me better for when that time actually comes.
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, what type of stuff you are inspired to share with men when it comes to getting better at this communication around consent.
Yeah, love that question. Um, I think, yeah, talking about some of like your maybe insecurities, et cetera, with other men in like a relatively safe container. I think a lot of times what we might call consent accidents or pressure or coercion doesn't come from like the man actually truly feeling entitled. It comes from insecurity. It comes from like I'll be a loser if I don't close, like like I'll be a simp, I'll be a chump, like or the only way to prove my manhood and make sure that like she really respects me is like go over it and fuck, like there's a lot of, and lots of compassion. So being open and honest with yourself, with your journal, with the therapist, with a
Yeah.
men's group, like being in a men's group. There's a man in my men's group. Like most of the men in my men's group are 30s, 40s, 50s. There's a man in his 60s. There's a brother who just joined. He's 19.
Wow.
This brother is like, and it's amazing how little he knows. But we're all looking at him like with so much admiration because he had the wherewithal and the thought to like be like, yo, actually, I do need this. This is healthy for me to be in a space where I can talk about my insecurities and my challenges with a group of men who are elders. Like, what? That was so smart. I wish I'd done that. We all say. The other thing to do around consent that I think is like such a truism from the consent educator world is to get really good at demonstrating your capacity to hold a no
Yeah.
outside of sex.
Yes.
Because what women are doing is noticing how is he with a no.
Ooh.
They're and they're, maybe this is a revelation, but they're noting, right? They're noting, and not just for like, but when they're on a date, they're tracking all the time. Does he get disappointed, self-righteous, angry, defensive when I tell him something that he doesn't want to hear? I'm not just talking about when you want to get Chinese and she wants to get Indian and you're like pouty and disappointed, although that's definitely an indicator that you might get also pouty disappointed if she doesn't want to have sex with you. And that might also lead to repercussions or ramifications for her that are dangerous. I'm just talking about like the degree to which, for instance, you maybe proactively create space for her to speak at a conversation. Just how often you're like, what does it look like if she says, hey, like I really wanted to go to the movies with you, but like, I realize I have just too much work to do tonight. Like, and if you're like, yeah, fine, whatever, and like just ghost on her for a month, like that indicates, oh, oh, yeah, now I'm less likely to want to have sex with him. I'm less like, right? Because how he is with that no is likely how he's going to be with a sexual no. And I don't mean like a rejection. I just mean with like even something disappointing. Like, I know you want to get your dick in right now, but actually, I need a lot more stimulation, or I'm not ready to have sex, or I have an infection, or like, are you like, can I trust him to be not just tolerant, like fine, okay, but like really genuinely, like, of course, totally, like totally understand. I don't mean like making men doormats. I don't mean
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sacrificing dignity and like
Yeah.
self-respect. We're all bad with power, all of us, regardless of gender or whatever is between our legs. We human beings tend to be bad with power. We tend to abuse it. I'll tell you what, we definitely abuse the power that we refuse to acknowledge that we have.
Mm.
So one of the best ways to be in the world is to be like tracking where power might lie and how it might be really generative and possibility filled to offer the space for someone to tell me something I don't want to hear
Hmm.
and demonstrate that I'm okay, not just okay with it, but that I can welcome it. I did this literally with you before we started recording. Remember?
Yeah. 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 And I feel like so much of this is about committing ourselves to be just better skilled communicators and encouraging that. Like, I think of how can I step into leadership as a man, be better at communicating and invite more communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's just the thing about the word communication is it's like such like a buzzword, and it's also just so vague. Like no one really knows what it means. Like, and a lot of men I see are like, right, like I thought that being communicative well or being like a good communicator was being authentic, and so when she told me she didn't want to go out with me, I was like authentically disappointed, and so I communicated to her. I was like, and I also was authentically curious, so I said why, right? So she said no, I don't want to go out with you, and I was like, why? Because I'm authentically angry and authentic, right? And so, like, come on, like, I thought the psychological edifice of America was telling me that I needed to be like in touch with my emotions and like communicatively honest. And then now I asked her why, and she like got really upset, and now she thinks I'm a creep because I pressured her. Really, communication isn't about like adhering to like a set of rules. It's about attunement
Mm.
and listening, and that's hard. We're not as good at that as men, but like we could be better. We could get better. But
Yes.
like I just wanted to call that out because like
Yes.
the word communication is very easy to assume like, oh, well, that what that means is like authenticity. So I could just wear my heart on my sleeve and that's what the world wants. And if I get bad reactions from that, well, that's fucked up. And that's the result of the world that, and I have seen that a
Mm,
lot actually. Um, Sometimes it means listening, sometimes it means talking, sometimes it
yeah.
means slowing down. One of my pieces of communication is I rush, I talk fast, I speak intensely, so I always have to work on slowing down. Um, yeah. Yeah, but being better communicators is a beautiful part of leadership in terms of, but let's be more specific, being able to recognize my emotional state, being able to
Yeah.
articulate when I can see something not
Yeah.
working, being able to do that in a way that's attuned
Mm,
to my own potential tendencies. For instance, like if I have a tendency to blame or if I have a tendency to deflect and make the problem that I'm noticing in the dynamic something that's their fault rather than my own. Communication is an incredibly nuanced art.
yeah.
So like, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, part of that continual growth is the self-awareness, is the emotional intelligence, is the pattern
Let's
recognition.
go. Let's go. Men and sex. Turns out that it's all about emotional self-recognition. This is why, by the way, that men and women are always telling us to go to therapy. They want us to be better in bed.
And
I'm just kidding. That's
ultimately,
like a gigantic oversimplification. But since the theme here is men and
yeah,
sex, if you think that like you could just like do some exercises and get better at semen retention, or like
yeah,
go to a pickup artist and learn how to like neg your way into like hookups and like just like rack up points and numbers on the board, I guarantee you that it will not lead to lifelong happiness or satisfaction. It will also not even lead to short-term happiness and satisfaction. It'll create an itch that will never feel scratched. And it won't create pleasure or joy in the world or in yourself. On the other hand, if you invest in your own personal growth and self-awareness,
yeah.
the mountains of pleasure and joy and yes, sex that are available to you are untapped.
Mm,
There's so and I like I say this with the humility of being in the body that I'm in,
yeah.
uh, that there is, you know, a very real sexual marketplace that is also makes it difficult for men of certain bodies or ethnicities or socioeconomic status, that all of that is relevant in terms of your sense of what I might call intimate abundance. It's very hard to act in integrity from a place of scarcity.
Yeah.
It's very hard to invest in yourself when all you are is just horny and lonely or desperate to prove yourself. And I just, again, the super soaker of love, compassion, and self acceptance. You are not crazy. You are living in a world that is fundamentally unfair. And your pain is real as men. Like your pain is real and valid.
And you're very worthy of your own investment.
Yeah, thank you. That's a better place to take it. Yes. Yes. Thank you for that.
You're very
Yes.
worthy of your own investment, of your time, of your money, of your attention, of all the things that help you blossom into the wonderful man that
Mm-hmm.
you are and can become.
Oh man.
Thank you so much, brother, for coming on here. And
Absolutely.
I learned a lot on this, and
Oh,
I'm
cool.
very
All right.
appreciative of the perspectives that you brought that were
Mm.
just, I could just feel it in my brain like tick, tick. And I think this is a very deep subject and ultimately a huge one that allows us to be actually more in our power in a way that is nourishing and of service to not only of ourselves, but
Yes.
to everyone
Yes.
around us and the world around us, that that power exists in going into this subject even if it's uncomfortable and brings up feelings of, ah, am I bad? Am I wrong? How did I hurt someone? You know, all of that. We can
Hmm.
face that and come out
Yes.
better on the other side.
Yes. Yes. Step into your power in a way that is of service. Step into your power in a way that understands harm. Step like be empowered as men, please. Like the world needs us. The world needs men who are like willing to wield power in the spirit of service. It's really my definition of leadership, by the way.
Mm,
He who or she who can wield power in a spirit of service.
mm, I love that.
And that's what the world needs. So the world does not need people look oh timid and afraid and embarrassed and ashamed and therefore resentful and angry, having that resentment and anger coming out sideways. We need you in your fullness.
Mm, beautiful. Listeners, I'm going to put Mischa's stuff in the description, ways you can follow what he's teaching, what he's sharing. Anything you got in the here in the near future that
Like
meant,
big offerings, no,
yeah,
but check
mentioned.
out, yeah, well, I'll put it in the show notes, but no huge
Yeah.
offering that I want to plug.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing, and I look forward to continue walking this path alongside you.
Really appreciate it, Ian. Thank you.
Cheers.